Today in the morning, I took that extra hour of sleep and I decided to keep it that way and use another get out of jail free card for my breakfast preparation. And I ate those same two burritos, but nonetheless, I made it to school around 8:40 a.m. since today was a late starter. And as for morning, I hesitated again because of that decision fatigue. Because there's a lot of groups to choose from if you come early to school. There was one that had three older friends from a few past classes. There was another one with an aloof person, and there was another one that had one person who I wanted to talk to, and there was another boy group and another girl group here and there. So for about 20 minutes, I hesitated on which group to go, but I still know that I had to show up anyway. So what I did is that since I was running out of time, I just went to the girl who seemed a little bit aloof. And honestly, the conversation went mostly decent again. I did the basic fastballs. How is your day? How is it going? And I asked my own questions to emphasize on them, such as, what do you like to do? I like to do this. And another basic slider, how's your experience here in this high school and for your 2 days? And like, what's your ethnicity? For my ethnicity, my parents are quote unquote, and basic stuff. And I struggled to keep the conversation afloat, but she still offered to help and ask questions back in a proportional manner. But nonetheless, best thing we can improve here is say less questions and be more attentive and emphasize is the best thing possible here. As starting to period one, today was fairly hot, but I managed to make it on time and reach the period. The teacher did her introductions and class schedule changes since there were some students switching classes, and we did quick introductions with each other. Some were late due to traffic, and later was an activity where we had to write in English and talk about ourselves. The board was hard to read though, and I took a long time because I answered questions both in Italian and Spanish. It was introduction paper, and I had to answer all in English, but I just did anyway. Next was another Q&A in general, and the class was talking this time. And the different scenarios the teacher said was a video game, or be trapped in it, or have it come to life. Others, such as be the one to do the laundry or the dishes. The other one was be a smart person, be a rich person, or be a hot person. And surprisingly, no one chose hot. But other people chose other scenarios, such as see the future or read people's minds. And surprisingly, everybody chose $40 in the pocket instead of $150 in toilet water. And people agreed on dream college over marrying a celebrity crush here, and people prefer tattoos over piercings. So that's the preferences of what was happening. The class laughed a little bit as there were some outlier answers, but nonetheless, people were pretty happy. But this went pretty fast, and we were able to finish up. And I did delay a little bit while I was writing down on that paper because everybody else finished. And when someone is one person who's still finishing and everyone else is done, it's that unspoken pressure right there. So I had that, so I just hurried up and answered everything else in English. For period two English, I made it on time, and phone holders were there, but there were no seating arrangements yet. And a margin note I do have to say is that I do have to turn in a stamp for period five regarding some notes. But later on, to continue this on, today she announced every Friday we would do cahoots on random things, and students get to pick whatever kahoot we want to do. And usually for the first 5 minutes, that is done before main assignments. And today we have the whole period to continue work on our nickname, so I did that, but on my coloring part. I made mine simple with a star background and triangle decorations, and when I finished, I looked at random things on my Chromebook. The class was talkative this time, but my table and only one other person was there, so it seemed mostly sad, I'll be honest, because one person I did talk to was a day one guy who I talked, and he seemed a little bit, well, aloof, as I can observe. Like, he seemed more in his devices, but I waved to him, I did all like it. He felt sad, but later we left. I don't know if he's just like, mm, but for period three, for math, as I entered, the weather was hot and I passed through thin corridors and lots of people were there. And in math, the teacher announced what things he do over the weekend and exciting things that we might do before next week starts. But later, he announced another introduction slide that we're going to do, and it's online, similar to Google Docs. He allowed phone usage this time since we can put whatever on the slide. I found one funny because one just said Ben without any decor on it, and it's Google Slides, I believe. You can put anything you want. And for this free time, the class was mostly vibrant, and this was like loud Walmart style music that was played in the background, keeping the room in a low fee bar style. People talked about movies and new people who are at the school. One funny thing is that someone replaced all the backgrounds of everyone a little bit in Google Slides. I decorated mine with a sport and a space background with other things such as Minecraft and video games. I joke I might get copyrighted for using these random images, haha, if I post them. Anyways, yeah, do big credit to the owners, respective owners of those images. For science class, this time moving down to period four, I made it late, but the teacher remained mercifully lenient, and even then we did forget our numbers for the caddies. She announced that sometimes we might have to use Chromebooks, and she will show the weak units that we will have. And we have a safety quiz to do after the typical science pre-assessment that we have, and she said that we must do a kick-ass job on the paper. And there was a new thing where you can also view Chromebook tabs. Apparently, the teacher can do so using a system, so like no cheating, which scared me and the class at this point. But later, though, I was hardly finished up the paper activity, and people were mostly loud as the time arrived closer to dismissal. But before that, I was actually surprised because she did reveal that there was this little system that she can view everyone's tabs and revoke internet or remove a tab. So if someone tries to cheat, they'll get caught immediately. So that's kind of like surveillance panopticon, but for homework. But before that, I did ensure to remove excess awkwardness at my table by introducing myself since my other seat was taken by someone else. I observed the classroom and saw old pictures of sports banners and the lizards nearby, and the two people on my table were mostly waiting. Except at least the funny irony here is that as the other guy in this period was in the restroom and the teacher announced the lab test, which is done for all classes, yeah, it's for 100 points, but she said it's on Monday, not did today. So they falsely assumed, since one has a knowledge gap from going to the restroom, that it was apparently due today. And the other guy said 100% for 50 to 100 questions not doing that. So this was a pretty funny literary term for that. I think audience knows what the characters don't. So she said that at the end, though, we will need a spiral notebook for this year. And at the end, everybody knows that we're not going to complete a 100 questionnaire just for this right at the end of the class. But for lunch, I found it quite interesting, so I'll be pretty honest. I hesitated for a bit because there were so many groups to choose from. So instead, there was a trans group, boy girl group, to another boy group who I wanted to join. There was another ASB group nearby, and a bunch of other groups. So I think out of the most groups I chose the one that I was with last year. And I'll be pretty honest, the conversations were mostly great. I did drift a little bit apart, and I'll talk about that later on. As for and it was mostly about internal gossip, jokes, and maybe some things I talk about myself. So it was mostly calm. I don't have much to say about them. Credit to you guys. I'll speak about it in the highlights later. But for period 5 today, we have our first introductory notes, and we put our phones in the caddies. The notes start with notes with history. And she made the topic for essential questions, and these are also used like I did with my science class last year. We learned about the general idea of history, and what was pretty ironic is that as she was showing an example of how history should be studied, she said, quote unquote, teenager life in 2026. We'd look at phones and devices and any device from this and a primary source and a secondary source. And she was all talking about that. But what I am doing is literally an example of that, a library of primary source data regarding my trajectory in my experience here at this school. I am a primary source to what has happened to me. So if you guys want to check out my older videos, but the activity we did was observing an 8-year-old's letter when Alaska was purchased and their letter to the president, who at that time we learned about evaluating the evidence and how culture defines opinions, from a South plantation owner to a northern factory worker, how they both think how the Civil War was eventually inevitable in their own ways. We did the note summary, but we used that info to reach a better conclusion on why we think history is so important. And I got my stamp, but the first time my teacher was confused and mixed it with somebody else's book who was just going on paper, and I mixed mine with another too. I learned to turn in notes, but it will require a stamp name and then submit it on Canvas later on. Unlike the bureaucratic thing, I think a lot of people can relate to this, especially across the entire school. There's this thing that over the weekend, I'm just improvising this from my paper here, is that every time you have something that's due, say it's something that's done on Friday, but it's due next Monday. And out of all the people, I know it'd be pretty divided because some people would choose to get everything done now on that Friday versus the other side who would just get it done on like the Sunday that's before, or get everything done before you turn it in on that same Monday. And I kind of call that the bureaucratic press because everybody has their own bureaucratic line in their own mind. In high school, if you have ASB responsibilities and there's this good friend group drama, ASB responsibilities will take over unless that friend group drama is something special. And I think at this point, that if you got something over the weekend and let's say you got some work to turn in, like that bureaucratic process, that's just gonna put your own paper and all the work that you have. We just put it on Sunday and put it ahead of time. Interesting psychological observation. As for period 6 engineering class, today I used the restroom and then eventually went to class almost making it late. Weather is always hot as always, but this time I sat further from my friend. But I hesitated. But eventually I went to him, but I had to make the switch with another friend near him. But to make that switch a little bit better, I shook his hand and I made dignity with him. I told him my name and I told him where to go into another empty spot. And then eventually I took his seat where I've always taken my seat at least 2 days before. I went with my OG seat there, and we have an activity where we have to build a mini vehicle and a mini something engineer to bring a little ball in a cup from point A to point B. It's a golf ball. We have to use a packet of items and build that vehicle with our 4 people that's in our group. So it's engineering that we have to come up. And I got confused because we're actually building something that's more closer to an airplane in terms of aerodynamics, not something like an actual car. Like when I think about vehicle, I think about a car, but a vehicle can mean many other things. So we used a tube, 2 cup balloons, even though that was 20 minutes and we are not able to finish. And I improvised with the tape because the balloons weren't working as well. But right at the end, we tried rubber band energy and under pressure because the other side didn't participate as much. And I do also say that this was about 20 minutes after we were given our time to do things before I presented them. But it seemed embarrassing, but I know everybody else was scared as we were, I'll be honest. We did good, and it went 1 inch further than the other balloon prototypes that failed. Today's metaphorical game highlights are 2 small things. The first thing in the morning is that I need to make a decision faster because groups solidify pretty fast. And if I want to talk to more people, although I was able to talk to someone this morning and it was great, it was like 2 people, I should pick the ones with the large groups because that's where my own social fear resides the most in. And this is a place that offers like the most friendship chances at least. I should also ask less questions at that point and throw less fastballs. Say more statements instead. And for lunch today, I realized I do also have to improve here because I do need to throw out more pitches and talk to people more. But most importantly, I should expose myself more to the environment. But at the same time, be careful because, well, any group is any group at that point. Because what I said there is that when the conversation was going a little bit dry, I said like, hey, what are you thinking about right now? And I tried to make this a little bit philosophical. But I made a very quick observation and I said, quote unquote, a bit loud here. But those 2 other girls laughed a little bit silently. So in that metaphor, that ball that I threw right there was like a curveball. That was misinterpreted, so I had to correct nonetheless immediately in that social spot. But I was dry, though, I'll be honest. But that was a little bit awkward. I'll make it that, but I did try my best. They did all try their best too, so I'll give that credits to them. But that is something that I do need to be careful about because when I do think deeply, but I do need to be also fast socially and also be, well, punctual. Just be careful. Most of the ambience conversations are about classes, life in general, and internal gossip. And for sixth period, I also did learn that if I want to switch seats and do something, I need to ask directly for a seat change and not hesitate because this seating is for the rest of the time being for this class. And like baseball, I also learned here that failed projects are common. But what matters most is showing up and trying anyway, and not just about projects.